everybody, my name is Jason Piercey. This is Out of the Fog. Super exciting show, lots of fascinating election stuff. We got the Premier and a guy who might even be more important than him. We'll be right back after this.
This is Rogers TV.
We're trying to locate a Donnie wee boy.
You let it be known you're looking for a wee boy. I'll find you.
Come with us. He'd kill me. You're with me on this, right?
They're right behind you. It's me, it's Millie. Oh my God!
She's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Who knows how many of our friends he's gonna kill?
I want my body back.
Come and get it.
You're watching Rogers TV, St. John's.
Welcome back to Out of the Fog. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to leader of the Newfoundland Labrador Liberal Party and current Premier, Mr. Andrew Furey.
Thanks.
So here at Out of the Fog, we're giving an opportunity for each of our party leaders to sit and have a conversation with the impending elections. I guess you're pretty busy though, hey?
Thanks for doing this. Looking forward to having a chat.
Well, I mean, you got more going on today than I do, so I'm grateful to you. So I'm not a real question and answer sort of interviewer. I don't consider this an interview.
Good.
It's more of a conversation. I don't have responses that I'm trying to drag out of you to make you look any way, shape, or form, but I do have topics that are of personal interest to me that I find our audience seems to be like-minded in considering them to be important also. So I sort of want to bounce concepts or ideas off you.
Happy to.
And you have the opportunity to elaborate. So this particular election has significantly more non-cis male candidates running. And I have personal opinions regarding the importance of that and its evolution in the political scene in general. And I'm wondering how you feel about that increased diversity.
Oh, I think it's a great thing. You know, the more diverse group of people who are offering themselves to public office, the better we all are. The better, you know, as when people stand up for public office, first of all, that's a great thing. But when we have a diverse group of people who are willing to do so, it makes us all stronger. It makes society better. It makes our legislature better. Anytime you have a diverse team, whenever they study teams, one of the things that makes a team more powerful is if you have diversity on it. You need to, if we all thought the same, acted the same, looked the same, guess what? You're going to get the same outcomes every single time. You need a diverse background, a diverse opinions, and frankly, it's a good thing. I'm really proud of the Liberal team, and frankly, proud of the other teams that have managed to put together a diverse group of candidates. It makes us all stronger.
I had it tossed to me as a little bit of a criticism on the short notice of calling an election, that it made it difficult to increase the amount of diversity based on the statistical so-called accuracy that a lot of women are often still primary caregivers. Whether that's a fallacy or not, I don't know. And that calling an election on a shorter notice decreases the likelihood that they have time to plan for that.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard that statistic too and seen some evidence behind it, but this isn't a snap election. Everyone knew the day that I put my hand on the Bible at the Lieutenant Governor's house, there had to be an election within a year. I mean, all parties were calling for it in the fall. I said I wouldn't call one in the fall. I said I wouldn't call one before the budget, but I said I would call one in 2021. So it's not, I understand the evidence and appreciate the evidence, but don't subscribe to it as a political tool during the election right now.
So acting all surprised about that is more a way of manipulating a situation.
Correct.
Okay.
So what we started from day one to start to recruit women and diverse candidates, and very proud to say that we have 15 women or non-binary candidates on our slate right now, and that takes time. We did research, as the research is out there for everyone, but we worked with stakeholders to understand the research a bit better of what those barriers are to women and non-binary individuals to enter the public sphere. And some of it just takes time. It takes some time to chat with them about the process, to have them have a better understanding of what's involved. Oftentimes, some of these individuals have never considered what a gift they have to offer public service. And so we started day one, chatting with people, recognizing that you know, if it truly was a snap election, you can't pick up the phone and ask someone like Gemma Hickey to stop doing what they're doing and join the team. You need to kind of cultivate a relationship, build a relationship.
Well, it take a little while to get your head around the fact that you're about to be, now for someone like Gemma, I mean, they have been so public about their thoughts for so long,
and they're down their own professional stream or their own family stream. I mean, I went through that this time last year. Like, there's all of a sudden an opportunity in front of you. I can appreciate more than anybody the difficulties surrounding having to make a decision, and having gone through it, it was it's not fun to have a distinct timeline on it. But this is not a snap election. I mean, like because of the law that Danny Williams instituted, it had to occur in a year. And frankly, I think that's a reasonable law. You know, I mean,
it makes a lot of sense. I mean,
totally.
Theoretically, everybody in our province. Through the jigs and the reels, didn't vote for Andrew Furey.
No,
they voted for Dwight Ball. So giving them the opportunity to affirm or discontinue that
100%.
Is their right in democracy. Excellent. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk maybe a little bit about the economy.
Sure.
So a pandemic, obviously a global pandemic, is that we're probably one of the safest places in the world if you ignore.
Touch wood, quick.
Yeah, right. If you ignore the North and South Poles, but. It has a negative effect on the economy. My day job is in real estate. I do a lot of new home construction, renovation through my different partners. The stimulus that was sent out there with big rebates, which I assume comes from HST revenue or whatever, to get people building and renovating, the intent of that, I suppose, was to get money flowing out in our economy and let people know everything's going to be okay. Can you rate that success, failure? Would you have done anything differently?
You know, I think it's, fairly successful from all the feedback we've been hearing. I wasn't there at the time, but, looking in the rearview mirror, conceptually, I suppose, the notion was to recognize that people are going to be not traveling, are going to be sitting home, and hey, they may want to do some renos when they're at home.
Money got spent and people went to work.
That was the idea, and I think, you talk to people who own the local home hardwares around the province, you talk to the contractors around the province, and people seem to think that this was a good thing, and it stimulated the economy, and I think we saw that with respect to how many applications we had for the program, and we also saw, everyone likes to look at jobs in the economy, and some of my opponents like to cast it like a spell over the electorate, but we have results. I mean, there's been, despite our troubles, from August to December, there's been 12,000 jobs added to the Newfoundland and Labrador economy. Those aren't my numbers. Those are Stats Canada numbers. I mean, that just shows that the economy is ripe here for further growth, and we need to make sure that as we emerge from this global economic crisis, which is not unique to Newfoundland and Labrador and has incredible external forces at play, but we need to be well positioned and ready to capitalize on economic opportunities that are afforded to us.
So let's talk more about the economy and also about independent third-party opinions. The recent economic report that was sent out.
By the CD Howe?
Yeah, so like people are, anytime you have anything like that, it's unfortunately can be open to interpretation.
Sure.
So tell our audience what that report means to you and how you move forward with that information.
So this is just one report based on unsolicited, based from a think tank, but there are pertinent findings in that report. There's no question. And it's not just their sources. Of course, they sourced that with a series of references at the end. So it is a robust report and has significant validity attached to it. When you look at the report, there's a number of striking things. Of course, it outlines in fairly dire language the current deficit and debt problem that is facing Newfoundland and Labrador. But it says that there are doable solutions attached.
Yes.
And I think, when we and it also says, and I think this is really important for everyone at home to recognize, it says in there that it took, and you can see the graphs to support it and the evidence to support it, it took us 10 to 15 years to get where we are through misspending and program spending and everything else. It's going to take us a while to get back to,
of course.
You can't, there's no magic budget, magic bullet, cut and hack and slash and burn.
I guess oil could go to $300 a barrel for a year, and then you could pocket it all.
I mean, that'd be great. But if
we could win the lottery.
But to that point, if it did go to $100 a barrel again, we need to make sure that we've learned, like the true failure in all this experience would be that if we didn't learn to create an austerity fund, to learn from the lessons of the past and not just spend it willy-nilly, make sure that we're saving some of that, putting it against our debt. Because if you look at the CD Howe report, our second, we're spending 15% of our annual budget financing our debt servicing costs. So for people at home, that's credit card debt. That's just to manage it. We spend on health, and then we spend to manage our debt. We haven't paid a teacher, we haven't paid a road, we haven't paid a police officer. That's how significant this debt is. But there is some promise there from an economic and a fiscal capacity situation. If you look at it, there's 15% that we spend, right?
Yeah.
But if you compare us to other provinces like PEI, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, granted they're on equalization, but they're down at around 11, 9, 8% kind of debt servicing. If we can find a way to unlock value in that debt to get our financing costs down around their levels, then we've unlocked $500 to $800 million. That's how much money we're spending to manage our debt every single year. That's without touching a public service employee. That's without touching services or anything else. Now, there are some structural issues we'll have to deal with along the way, but that's the second line item. Everyone wants to talk about programs. Health is a program. Our second program, if you will, is credit card debt, and we need to figure out how to get it under control.
To relate this to our audience, let's say you have a household income of $50,000 a year.
Sure.
That means that $7,500 of what you make every year just goes towards servicing debt. There's no return on the value.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Often not paying on the principal.
You don't pay off anything. It just keeps it there forever.
Status quo.
Are you saying that part of the plan, and it's okay not to have the solution, it's just it's part of the plan, are you saying that you're finding a way for that family that makes 50 grand to refinance or consolidate its debt so that 100%. You lower that?
We need to kind of look at creative options, because right now, the cost of borrowing is so low. Like I heard a comparison to...
I talk about it in real estate every day.
Right, so the comparison that I've heard a lot is, we just saw the federal finance minister, Minister Freeland, book a $330 billion deficit this year. The cost to borrow that amount of money was very similar to the cost to borrow $1 billion, I think, as it was in the 90s under Paul Martin. So, you got to think about that, and there's value in that in consolidating or finding different paths through different lenders with lower interest rates. Because we are, of course we're facing financial challenges, but there's bright, optimistic future here, and I think the bond raters understand that and know that we have great opportunity here, whether it's in our minerals or oil and gas or fish or the booming technology sector. They're wise to see that there is a path forward here, and unlike some others and one of my opponents, they haven't given up on us, and we haven't given up on ourselves.
I wish we had enough time to talk about the booming technology sector, because I do think that that is something that over the long term could sort of not replace oil and gas, but maybe over like 25 to 30 years.
Let's be clear, we're always going to be a natural resource-based economy, but one of those natural resources can be our people, and in our innovative, creative nature and ingenuity, which drives a booming technology sector. It turns out we're really good at it.
Yeah.
We need to be making sure that we're investing in it along the way. But for people at home, an investment in technology is not investing in some guy in a basement with an iPhone creating an app. It's truly an investment in every other industry that we're supporting.
Given how safe we are in a global pandemic, should we not be attracting people to come here and build their businesses because you can do it safely?
Absolutely,
right?
And you've heard me say that on the weekly updates with Dr. Fitzgerald. We've seen that the lawyer or the financier on Bay Street doesn't have to be on Bay Street anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
They can be there if they want, but they're sitting in an apartment by themselves. They're not going into the bank. They're doing it from a small apartment. If they can do it from a small apartment in downtown Toronto, certainly they can do it from a beautiful piece of property in Trinity Bay.
Yeah. So let's switch gears again. Obviously, coming from a medical background, seeing what happened with how our province handled the COVID-19 outbreak and pandemic, the initial cluster coming down. I mean, I got to imagine you were watching that unfold. Clearly,
I was working in the COVID, on the front lines and volunteered for the COVID unit. My wife was working in the COVID unit.
How do you feel we handled it, and would you do it differently moving forward?
I think we've handled it great. I mean, the way we've handled it has been, in my opinion, very, very good and almost perfect. But I mean, nothing is perfect,
Yes.
right? So, it's inappropriate to ever say something's perfect. You can always make improvements on everything. But Dr. Fitzgerald and her team,
What
first
a
of
rock
all,
star.
yeah. And first of all, let me give full credit to the former Premier Dwight Ball for declaring a public health emergency and handing power of decision making with respect to our public health over to Dr. Fitzgerald and her team. I mean, that's a strong piece of legislation, and she's got a great deal of authority. What that does is it takes political manipulation and political decision-making out of the...
Do you think the public understands that?
I don't, but I think that's important to understand. There's no political meddling in this process. And as a scientist, as a doctor, as someone with a master's in clinical epidemiology, let me tell you, that's incredibly, incredibly important. You need to follow the science. You need to follow the evidence. Having now put on the Premier's jacket, the pressures are immense. The pressures to please everyone are immense. And you could see how you could succumb to those pressures, but having that check and balance there to making sure that you're following the science, following the evidence, has what's kept us safe. And, I know everyone was frustrated, especially in the early days, about getting the economy back booming and everything else. We've seen now in other jurisdictions how they tried that and it didn't work.
Well, I mean, Ontario right now.
Ontario,
Alberta went through
Alberta,
it,
Quebec. Right now, because we've followed those rules and followed those guidelines, we are able to have restaurants open. We're able to have children back to school. My son plays hockey 2 or 3 times a week. Like, that's not happening in Ontario. That's the benefit to following the evidence and not meddling with politics. Even with, like, for me, you can imagine that's a bit of a hard dichotomy to reconcile because I'm struggling. I have some knowledge in this area and like to discuss it, but I would never want to impart my political views on any decision making.
Because in theory, Dr. Fitzgerald is the one who knows the most, so we let her make the decision, kind of. Makes sense. Before we go...
And she's been flexible, right? And one of the first things we did, as we know, of course, that one thing we do know is that this virus is uncertain. And
it's adaptable.
And we've gained a lot of evidence over the year, right, about how this changes and what we should and shouldn't be doing. Right now, other jurisdictions in Canada are looking to us as how to keep people safe.
Hey?
Yeah, Manitoba, right? Manitoba's shutting its borders. And they're introducing similar tests that we have for rotational workers in Manitoba and other places around the country because they've seen that it works here. We're leading here. We're not following. We're leading, and I think that that's the right thing to do.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after a quick break. Straight out of the Premier's mouth, you deserve to have hope and optimism. Be right back.
All right, girls.
Mom, you said it's played again.
Workplace injuries hurt the most at home.
It's about sharing and caring. It's about doing and belonging. It's about living life to its fullest. And it's about laughing out loud. We are L'Arche Canada, and we're about witnessing and sharing the gifts of all people. Learn more about us today.
Welcome back to Out of the Fog. We're talking a lot about elections. Politics is a very big thing. It's a very important thing. However, the behind the scenes of how it all plays out and how it all gets organized is also very, very important. Cue Mr. Bruce Chaulk, the Chief Electoral Officer for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. I imagine with an election coming up, you got stuff to be at.
There's always something to be at.
There's always something
There's a
to
lot
be
of
at.
late nights at the office till 11 or 12 o'clock at night for basically the full 28 days.
Wow. Okay. So just for anybody who's watching, because I'm not entirely sure people understand the role of Chief Electoral Officer or its significance all of the time, let alone during an election campaign and an election process itself. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of context for what the role is and what you do so that they can understand the rest of the stuff that we talk about?
Right. And I think it all goes back, and you've got to... by definition, I'm an officer of the legislature, so I'm an independent officer of the House of Assembly, which makes me nonpartisan. So I have no opinions about any political party, and so they are all the same in my book. My job is to make sure that any election or a by-election or a plebiscite is managed properly, so that it runs smoothly. I've had it explained at times that people say is that running an election is like hosting 40 weddings all on the same day with a very big guest list, and you're not sure who's going to show up.
That sounds about right.
And that's the reality of it. So really what we have is we're having 40 elections, or 40 separate elections, and there are 362,000 people invited to that election.
So, I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Especially if people aren't RSVPing to let you know that they're going to be there. They're trying to organize that. So obviously, you can't be the only person that's a part of that team.
No. No, I have a core staff in my office of about 11 or 12 of us. We're there permanently. We have to be getting ready for an election, or as soon as an election is over, we have to wrap up from that one and start to get ready for a new one, because it's a very it's a legislated process. So there's only certain ways that you can run it.
Sure.
And it's all dictated
I guess there's
by
a rule
legislation.
book.
There is. The Elections Act is there, and that governs everything from how much the nomination fee is to what has to be on the nomination papers, who can sign the nomination papers for a candidate, how much money they can spend on their campaign, how much money they can raise, how they can raise it. So there's a lot of rules in it, and that legislation is what dictates how we do our job.
Interesting, fascinating. So can we talk a little bit about how your role is different now, given that it's during, I mean, a much less stringent stage of a pandemic, but still during a global health crisis? Like, is the process different now? Are you expecting more advanced polls versus people on election day, mailed-in ballots, stuff like that?
Yeah, and ever since the pandemic was identified and the cases were traveling around the world, my staff and I were working through how things might change. And I think globally, the one major election that was held was in South Korea. They had at the height of the pandemic in that particular area. We observe what they were doing.
See what the rest of the world is doing.
See what the rest of the world is doing, and things like that. There have been 3 general elections in 3 different provinces since the summer. Mm-hmm. We know what they do. I talk to my colleagues across the country.
So we get the opportunity to observe other people doing it,
yeah.
Pick out the good stuff that happened, the bad stuff, or whatever, and kind of adapt?
Kind of adapt. Now, there's certain things that they can do that we can't do because their legislation is slightly different. So, the other part is we've been in pretty much constant discussions with Dr. Fitzgerald's office since March.
Because she's kind of the boss right now. Like, the way the legislation works,
yeah.
She's the one, you're the one who should theoretically, and I think in this case practice,
yeah.
You should be the one with the most information to be able to make the best decisions. That's why you're empowered with that, right?
And that's right. We've been talking to them, and we also talk to our colleagues across the country who also deal with their chief medical officers of health. So after they had certain experiences, we would talk to her about, what about this or what about that, if we can change this or change that. And that's where we came to our rules and our guidance, and it's all of our COVID COVID-19 information is on our website.
I'll come
So we've got circulars there for how the candidates can campaign, what they can and can't do. We've got information there as to what we do at the polling station.
I'm thinking about, and I really wish that we had way more time, but silly Premier took too much of it. It comes to my mind that, and we'll have to wrap it up on this, I guess, but having to be nonpartisan in your role, it kind of creates a little bit of a conflict of interest if you yourself want to vote.
That's an interesting question.
Fine not to comment on
no, that is an interesting question because some of my colleagues across the country are not allowed to vote.
Yeah,
by
and that's
law.
where I was going. It seems to me like maybe you shouldn't be allowed to.
That's a debatable point. It would be an issue if I had to look at it and say that in the particular district, if the person won by one vote and I was the one vote,
you would have to.
Exactly. But then there are other processes, so that in a case like that, it would be a judicial recount. But you wouldn't know how I voted anyway. But that is an interesting question.
Bruce, thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm ever Premier, I will never allow Bruce Chaulk to vote ever again. And it's him who said it, not me. Thank you very much. We'll be right back after this.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Welcome back to Out of the Fog. I would like to clear something up a little bit. After Mr. Chaulk left, I asked him, how do we come to the conclusion that we can hold elections inside public schools when the kids can't get their parents to come watch them play basketball and things like that? Because a lot of people are upset about that. And he put it to me in a very, very enlightening way. We are in a state of public health emergency. It's declared under our legislation. And that puts the chief medical officer in charge of making these decisions. She is chosen because she is, both in theory and in practice, the best person to make these decisions. If Dr. Fitzgerald says it's okay to have elections on Saturday and then an empty school and then everybody cleaning up before Monday, then it's also okay for you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or